nice.
It's going to be 90 when I land in Arizona.
Spring well, okay. Thanks. My kids didn't make you stand yet. I will have to Mallory, if we're getting our dinner.
All right. So it's called to order this Park City School District work session meeting on March 31st at 10 a.m. To the Pledge of Allegiance. And
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We will go straight into our master planning. Todd, did you want to say anything to start us off, or?
No, I'll let Dave Hart run the show this morning. I am noticing on the YouTube that I have audio, but I don't have video.
Yes, correct, for today.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay, should we proceed?
Yes, let's go.
All right, what we wanted to do first is to make sure we have the priorities straight. And so, over the last 2 meetings, what we've heard is to move 9th grade into the high school and provide for CTE. Combine grades 6, 7, and 8 at Eckerd Hill for the junior high school. Provide additional pre-kindergarten classrooms at every elementary school and wraparound services at 2 strategic sites. So that means that Jeremy Ranch and McPolin would have the wraparound services, but Parley's, Park, Jeremy Ranch, McPolin, and Trailside would all have the pre-kindergarten added to it. We were to look at minimizing disruption to student activities. We all recognize that construction is disruptive, but we wanted to look at minimize the impact, reduce or eliminate displacement of students during construction unless absolutely necessary. There was a discussion at the last meeting about looking at efficiency, and the way we heard that was to maintain the operational use of the facilities during construction, reduce impact on school, and reuse as much of the existing building as possible, so we're avoiding extensive demolition, and then limit costs to necessities. That's kind of what we heard. Construction duration, you wanted us to limit the duration or look at the least number of months that we could get to, and so we've gone back with that. And then incorporate the green enhancements for sustainability. And as we looked at that, we realized in listening to the discussion that it was kind of energy efficiency first, which if we can get to renewables like solar or geothermal, we would do that. But there are certain things we can do with just high efficiency equipment and LED lighting and some of those things that will help reduce energy consumption. Use of green building materials. The development of green building materials over the last 10 years has really moved things along greatly, and almost everything you buy today has a lot of recycled product in it or is more green than it was 10 years ago. And then LEED certification. While we didn't talk about it, we looked at some things, and there was kind of a silver minimum standard that we heard. And the levels are certified silver, gold, and platinum. So silver is a good step up. It's not hard to achieve because there's been so many developments that have taken place over the last couple of years in quality materials and low VOC paints and good quality carpets that don't off-gas. So that won't be too challenging. And so it'll be a desire on your part as to whether or not you want to certify or whether you want to go to silver and how you want to approach LEED from the standpoint of registering others. But we can certainly manage the project to accommodate that, and then if you want to go ahead and pay the money for the certification or for the plaque, we can certainly do that. So those were the priorities, the 7 priorities that we heard as we have gone over the last couple of weeks. And from the nods that I'm seeing, it sounds like it's about right. Is there anything we're missing, or is there anything that we didn't get that you had thought about?
No, I think it's all in there. You
Yeah.
guys think?
Yeah, I feel like.
And question, just is this in rank order of priority? So number, the first priority is that
I
what you're
think
saying, or
so,
you're kind of just
yeah.
thinking here are all of our priorities?
It's kind of what we've heard.
Right, okay.
And over the last 2 times we've met, it always seems that the 9th grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th were always at the top,
Yeah.
and then the pre-kindergarten. So your goals of what to accomplish always seem to drive it. And then the other 4 goals, the minimizing disruption, efficiency, construction duration, and incorporation of green, seem to be things that you want to try to accomplish, but the first 3 are imperative.
Okay, I agree. Uh-huh.
And that's kind of what
Yeah.
we understand.
Great. So in doing those first 3, you're doing 4, 5, 6.
Right, so all the other things will kind of add on
Right.
to it if that's where we want to go.
Great. This is great. Thank you.
So then let's jump into the different schools.
Okay.
So the first one is the high school, just down the street. And in the last meeting, we talked a little bit about wanting just to focus on the high school and not worrying about the rest of the site that's associated here. And so this is the existing plan, and I will note that the area in red is the way it was colored by MHTN. We're not anticipating making any changes to that area. You'll see that in the next slide that red stays there, but we are also using red to show the addition, and I don't want anyone to think that we're trying to change anything with the Eccles Theater or the Performing Arts.
Okay. So this is the footprint and current layout today.
Yeah, this is the footprint as it sits today.
Okay. And red is just representing
And red
what
is
sits
just the
in that
color
area
that
today.
that
Thank
MHTN
you.
used to denote that particular area of the building.
Great.
Unfortunately, they used the same color red to show the addition.
Okay.
So in this diagram, for example, you can see to the west of the existing high school, and I've highlighted the areas that we're adding in the oval with yellow. That's the area we're adding, we're not touching the area that's in red on the floor plans. So anyhow, if we look at this, the construction costs are about $40 million, $40.6 million. The green enhancements at $75 a square foot, and that's an average number that we're using for all of the green enhancements. And so as we get into the discussion, that number may go down or it may go up, but we can manage to a budget.
Sorry, can I interrupt you for half a second? So I was looking at the slide before we have the existing footprint, and then I'm looking at the overlay.
Right.
So are you suggesting demoing that whole
Yes.
left wing and then rebuilding what's in red?
That's correct.
Okay.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Okay.
the west wing as it's currently situated there, with
So
the
demo.
little kind of knob
So
thing
you're
on
gonna
the
knock this
side.
whole thing out?
Right,
Okay.
and then we would build back over the top.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I see. Yeah.
Right. And so then the FF&E is about $3 million. The architect's fees, based on the MHTN estimate, and all of these numbers come from MHTN's estimate, are $2.4 million, and then the owner costs are about $3.5 million. What this will do is this will move the 9th grade into the high school. It minimizes the disruptions to the student activities because with the exception of the area that we're demolishing, everything else in the high school will probably continue to move forward. We have looked at the duration of the construction, and we'll talk about that when we get to the schedules, but we've tried to align that with pulling it back and making it work so that you're finishing the high school and the junior high at the same time, so that things can transition at the appropriate time, rather than having one happen and then the other. In talking to Todd, we felt like that was a better outcome for the school rather than trying to have one end earlier and one end a little later.
So the amenities that would be disrupted, I'm just going back and forth between the two. So the things that are in the wing are the CTA, CTE. So that would be the only aspect that would need to sort of be modular.
That would be kind of disrupted
That
for
would be
the time being.
Okay.
We'll have to find a way to handle that.
But it's minimal, I mean, it's just.
Right.
And then once it's built in CT, we'll go back in there with all of these other amenities.
Right, I also
Right.
think, isn't your daycare
Yeah.
in there as well right now?
Mm-hmm.
And so that would have a disruption.
And that will move over to the learning center.
Over there. Oh, wait, say that again? It'll move.
That'll move to the learning center.
Learning center.
Yeah.
Okay, so that way it has its own little entrance,
That's right back at home.
Indoor,
Yeah.
right. Okay, all
So
right.
that's fine.
Well, that makes
This
sense.
is so you understand what we're suggesting.
Great.
So the total impact, cost-wise, for the high school would be about $59.2 million. Then moving on to Eckerd Hill, again, you can see the site plan the way it is today, and you can see the floor plans associated with that in this diagram. And so in looking at the different options, we feel as though the option to add the two wings to the north of the triangle and then the gymnasium to the west, I guess, is probably the best option. Also, we wanted to make sure that you realize that there is a little bit of remodeling that will happen within the cafeteria area and with that, what they're calling the maker space, just in that triangular space. So this does have some impact on the interior of the building, and we'll have to try to work around that, but this seemed to be the most appropriate use out of the two schemes that we were looking at. So this one is also the least cost at $23.5 million for construction. Again, using the $75 a square foot for the green enhancement, about 7.8. The additional FF&E is 1.7, and the architect's fees would be about 1.4 million. And then the owner's costs are about 2.2 million. This accommodates your priorities of combining 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. We have done everything we can to try to minimize the disruption to the student activities. This will be a little more disruptive because you are doing some work on the inside. And so there will have to be some accommodations made for the cafeteria while that's being worked on. Maybe that can be done over the summer months when school is in recess. And we can kind of work around that, but we'll have to work with the contractor to make sure that works.
So the 3 red additions are obviously not displacing anyone that's additional, so that could be sort of tarped off,
Right.
worked on kids. So yeah, that high, big, story
Right,
area
I
is
think
where.
what can happen in those is that they can really kind of be built outside the school, so the schools can still function.
Okay,
But it's really when you come into the orange area in the plan that you see that you're
Yeah.
going to start seeing that. Also, there will be some noise associated with this because you're building right outside the walls. And so we'll work with the contractor to try to limit that, but construction is noisy.
yeah,
You'll still hear the backing up of trucks and you'll hear the moving of things. And unfortunately, they drop stuff from time to time.
yeah.
I have a
So-
quick question. Behind this part that these additions, that I know there was another model, I don't disagree that you chose this one. The other one that had it across here as well,
Right.
right? Was this choice cost or time or what, why do you
There
think
were-
this is a better one?
There were 3. One was the amount of demolition.
Okay,
If you go down to right where it says the main entrance there in the slide,
yeah,
there is a line just above the word main.
yeah,
If you run that straight across to your left,
uh-huh,
that's the amount of demolition
Got it.
that we'd be looking at. We'd be removing the entire triangle.
wow, okay.
Second of all, because of that, the other scheme takes longer to build
Okay,
and it's more expensive.
okay,
And so we thought that this accommodates all of your needs
Yep.
from the readings and the analysis that we were able to do at a lower cost
Okay.
and at a
Okay.
shorter time period.
Right.
And so the red parts will be 2 stories,
I believe so, yeah.
and how you organize the building post-construction is complete. I mean, you could say 6th you're downstairs and 7th you're split,
Right.
and 8th you're up. It doesn't, you're
Yeah,
not
they're
building these
learning,
spaces.
they're learning communities, the way they've been designed, and so
Yeah.
they're flexible so that you can have people meet and do other things. You can combine it or you can separate it,
Got
however
it.
you want to do it.
Dr. Gilday, what do you think, is there a difference to you about having, I can't remember what that space was gonna be for.
This one better.
Do this?
I liked it.
You liked it better,
Yeah,
okay,
because
right.
I like that we're gonna build the cafeteria on just the other side
Right,
of the
okay,
kitchen.
got it, yeah, that makes sense.
And that's easy to do.
Okay, okay,
And I think the building's age, it's time to give it kind of that refresh,
That's
but
right.
it doesn't need a full.
second, that other area, okay, great.
Yeah. And I love that we're gonna use that center section to really highlight the career pathways in CTE, because I think that's, we keep talking about 21st century learning, learning for the future, and this is where you highlight all of those cool activities that right now are in like back hallways.
Okay, good. And when we get into the specifics, like, are we talking about, removing that high third story area, making it two
No, it's
floors?
actually gonna be kind of like a, sort of like glassed in,
Oh,
kind
cool.
of like observable learning space.
Very nice, okay.
Yeah. That'll be good.
Awesome. Very excited. And then it's future pool expansion is future pool expansion.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
That's
okay.
the,
That was.
Yeah,
it.
that can happen at a later time. We're not planning to do that
okay.
now. As we understand it, the school does have some maintenance issues that it's looking at with regards to some of the mechanical equipment, and we're working with Todd and with others to try to work through what they should do and maybe what they want to hold off doing.
Great.
As we learn a little bit more about what they're doing, maybe we can combine the two efforts and make sure we do it the right way, so that we're not fixing something today just to throw it out tomorrow.
And then how would the green initiative work on something like this where, 80% of the building's existing, we're just adding on 3 modules? So great, I'm making it up, we could do solar panels on these 3 additions, but how would this green initiative to get that certification, what would we need, are you going to get into what we would need to do to the rest of the
Well,
building?
yeah, we can talk about that now. So with the additions, so the way we're structuring this right now, the green initiative is $75 over the 104,000 square feet. So the 104,000 square feet includes the 3 red elements plus the remodeling on the interior. So you are able to, you do have enough money there to kind of extend it beyond just the 3 additions. So you can, go ahead.
Just before you go on, because I'm sorry, this probably is silly and stupid, but $75 related to just the square footage of the new stuff, correct?
Correct.
Correct. So it has nothing to do with the existing space and any remodels and green enhancements there. This is 75, and then how did you come up with $75 per square foot? Meaning what?
Sure. So $75 a square foot was the number that MHTN had
Okay.
identified through their study and through working over the last year or so. In looking at that, we think that that $75 gives you a certain amount of leeway for both materials and some renewables.
Okay.
And depending on which renewables you want to go with, some are a little higher, some are a little more expensive.
Okay.
But you can certainly do that.
When you're talking about materials, are you talking also about materials that you're building with?
Sure, carpets, walls, ceilings,
Okay.
lights, all of those kind of things.
Okay.
And so we want to look at good quality green materials. But the 104,000 square feet is really this whole area.
Okay.
And
So not just
so,
the red.
and not this area here. And so there's enough money there to be able to look at, for example, if you wanted to buy solar panels,
Yeah.
you can buy solar panels, you can put, say, 50% of that into solar panels, which would be a little over $3.5 million. And we put that into solar panels, and we find a place somewhere on the roof or on the site for those. All of that energy will go into your electrical bill for the entire facility, which will reduce the overall bill. It's not just going to run the new area, it'll run the whole thing. So some of the green initiatives can be used for the entire facility, like the photovoltaics. On the other hand, if you want to go to LED lighting, that would just be for the remodeled area and the new areas, because we're not going to go over to the existing portion.
Work it out. Got it.
And
Now,
so
so
it's a
some
matter
will
of
have
how
an
you want to
impact on
balance
everything.
it.
When you said photovoltaics, is that more of a passive solar system, like a drum wall or
No, the photovoltaics are the solar panels.
the solar panels?
Yeah, they're the
But do you
chips.
have any more passive solar,
Sure.
like drum walls and?
We
We
could
could do
certainly
some of
look at passive systems. A lot of what, the way the school is oriented, it'll be a challenge, but you could do some passive work in the cafeteria remodel. The northern orientation, if I'm reading the plan
There's that,
correctly, is a little challenging for you. It's great light for studying and reading and working in because it's not highly reflective and there's not a lot of glare with it. And so you can have a lot of glass and you can pick up a lot of natural light, which will offset your energy costs because a lot of your energy costs come from lighting within the building. But from a standpoint of being able to gain heat and transfer that heat into the system, it is not good. And so your orientation works a little bit against you. If you want
And
to
also,
use
you probably use a square footage making a thermal wall wherever you could.
you would
that heat.
use a certain amount of square footage for it. And I don't know, and this is something we could look into, I don't know how effective a tron wall would be because of the size and the volume
That's
that
what
you
I'm
need to deal
wondering.
with.
Because it would take up quite a few.
Right, a lot of times in these buildings, the enemy is heat that you want to get rid of, rather than
Oh.
that you want to heat with.
Being that we live in Park City, I was thinking that the opposite, that we'd want to
You know,
capture more
the
heat.
problem is these lights,
Yeah,
and they're on all the time, plus you've got the mechanical systems that are trying to deal with heat all the time. And so in a lot of areas, but what we need to do is kind of look at the school and get an understanding of what the energy bills have been, get an idea of what you're doing in the winter and the shoulder and spring and fall months for heating and cooling, and then how your winter is set up. And then we can take a look at and say, we definitely need a heating cycle, and then we can start looking at how do we produce heat.
And as part of that, it would be interesting to learn about the pool space, because I'm assuming we pay the utilities in that. You know, like,
Sure.
I don't know what it is, are we heating the pool, or, you know, just, what are the
Yeah,
expenses
source,
that go
yeah.
into the pool area?
Yeah,
Because
there's
maybe
boilers
that's,
and all kinds of things.
yeah, that may be a big drain, and that may be an even bigger reason why we might want to go solar, or whatever.
if I'm not incorrect, I don't think we have any coolers in the schools, air conditioning at all, do we?
We do,
We do?
yes.
Where's that?
The high school has air conditioning, Parley's Park does,
Does Ecker?
yes, Ecker does, too. in
So-
certain areas. It's not the whole building, but they do have chillers and, yes.
Or interesting.
Yeah.
I know we do here. Swamp coolers would be good here.
Yeah, and you're seeing that more and more in schools across the state.
Really?
I know that when I was going to school, a lot of schools were not air conditioned. High schools were, junior highs were just starting to, but elementary schools. So that has been trending to where they're air conditioning everything.
Yeah, when I moved here 25 plus years ago, never needed air conditioning, but I do now.
Yeah.
I don't
So
even
that
remember
might
what
be
our original
something
question
considered.
was before we derailed you, so
Oh,
sorry.
that's okay.
Do you remember?
The original question?
Uh-huh. We started to answer before we all
We
did
kind of took you off track.
No.
You?
I got it.
Okay,
We were
never
asking
mind.
about the demolition, like why this model was the one
Oh,
that.
that's
Oh,
what we
that's
got.
right. Yeah, and
And
so.
then
Oh, and
it's
then
the
you got into
75 bucks a
75
square foot is where
there
it
you go.
goes
Yeah,
16
and then we
or
got to the
Green
$75,
enhancements.
right?
Yeah.
So anyhow, this total then comes to about 36.7 million to accommodate all of these things. So then if we jump into the elementary schools, the first one is Parley's Park. And this one's a little different configuration than a couple of the other ones. And so what we're suggesting here is that there be an addition to the north and to the west. And this is the same one that was recommended in the study. And we feel like it does accommodate what you're looking for. It adds the additional classroom space that you need for pre-K, and it also adds the additional space for the gym and some of those things. So this cost would be $8.7 million. You'd have about $2 million in green enhancements. FF&E would be about $659,000. Architect's fees are about $527,000, and the owner's costs are about $825,000.
Can I ask you a question on the FF&E? Are we going to standardize that across, since it's, are we going?
I think you should, and I think that's a really great question. I think that if it's at all possible, that we should identify seating, desks, the type of furniture that you want to buy, and then work out either a relationship with the furniture that's on state contract so that you can get a benefit of that state procurement process. Or we ought to identify kind of what you want to see happen and get a good specification and a good set of documents that covers the entire spectrum and bid it. The worst thing you could do, in my opinion, is try to do furniture individually for each group, because then what you've done is you've kind of opened the door to scope creep, because then everybody gets to pick their own little favorite thing, and you don't get any economy to purchasing.
Right.
A lot of times with furniture, if you buy in bulk or you buy a lot of it, your price can come down. Furniture is one of those things where whatever is in list is probably 20 to 30% higher, and they don't even intend to sell it at list price. They always will give you a discount. So it's just a matter of how deep you can force that discount by kind of working through that. We've gone through and done that a lot.
And I also think as we model these flex spaces, to be able to say like, okay, we've just increased this by 50, we need 50 of those, and it's not, like you said, it's hodgepodge, it's a standardized
Right.
seating system or whatever we decide.
Right, and a lot of things today are on wheels.
Yeah.
You know, chairs are not the only thing on wheels anymore, but like these tables, they're on wheels, and you use them to do different configurations, and even the televisions, and even I should say the monitors, and the other things, all of that is mobile. And so this, one of the things we looked at Skyline and Cypress was, can we eliminate any buildings at all? And just go with everything that's mobile. So if a teacher is teaching a course, say in science, regardless of whether it's in the elementary or the high school, they have a flexible space, so they bring their things with them, or they move them out, or they store them somewhere, and they're easily transportable.
Okay.
So there's some, I think there's a lot of flexibility that adds to, because then as what you build as time changes and teaching methodologies change, or you want to go more to a 21st century model, then the building will adapt with you, rather than in the old days where it was either the open plan or the closed plan, and if you went with an open plan, you couldn't go to a closed plan, and if you went to the closed plan, you couldn't get back to the open plan, unless you do a lot of demolition. I think what we want to help you do is build the most flexible thing you can, and then allow the teaching ideas to work into all of this.
Great, I love that. Okay.
So this will allow for the pre-kindergarten classrooms. It'll minimize, again, the disruptions. We've looked at all of those other things and it'll incorporate the green. And this is about 12.7 million. The next one, these next two are very similar. So Jeremy Ranch is kind of an H-pattern school. And in looking through the diagrams, MHTM recommended expanding to the north with an extension that's kind of a block building. And that's about $9.2 million. The green enhancements are around $2 million. Again, the FF&E is about $700,000. The architect's fees are $555,000. And then the owner's costs are about $850,000, totaling about $13.2 million. And again, this one adds a little bit more. It adds the pre-kindergarten classroom and the wraparound services. And I think the nice thing about this plan and the next one at Poland is that they're basically the same plan and the same model. So this would be one where we might be able to gain some advantage by hiring one architect and giving two schools to one architect. It would also allow them to maybe move the project forward a little faster because they're basically designing one design.
Great.
Can
Thank you. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question? What's the, given that the Jeremy and Poland are going to have the wing plus the wraparound services, I expected them to come out around this level. I'm a little surprised by the Harley's one. Why is that? So
Harley's
why is
is-
that the same price given that it's only a classroom extension?
Yeah, it has to do with, if we back up, it has to do with the amount of surface area on the exterior and the fact that they are really kind of two builds. And so it's a matter, if you look at the square footage that you're adding, and you compare the square footage that you're adding to the new one, the new one's a little more efficient, but it's only 2,000 square feet more. And so by the time you you demolish the other building, which is part of the other thing. You've got to include some demolition. And if you then look at the surface area on the exterior, you're building these two little elements. It does add up a little bit more.
So it's just the way that the building has to be done to
Pretty
each
much.
of the property. rather
Right,
than what we're building.
it's a function of what you currently have, which is, unfortunately, I don't have the whole floor plan, but it's this kind of a C-shaped building with a bustle on the back. And what we're really doing is kind of cleaning off that bustle and then adding these two elements to it. So it's a little more complicated addition.
And that Jeremy McPolin add-on wouldn't work. Looking at it, you'd have to probably put it in the play area, and I don't know if it would architecturally work.
I'd have to study that.
I don't know if it'd say anything.
It's not as easy. Because what you want to do is you kind of want to tie it onto a corridor.
Right.
And so probably the only place to do it, if we were going to do that, would be to put it over here,
Right.
which would impact this, so you'd have to move it out. But you wouldn't be able to pick up the gym area,
Okay.
which is one of the areas that facility's lacking.
Got it.
So I think they
It's
have
so
a little
small.
different needs.
Got it.
And then can I go back to, Jeremy, it looks like the new addition would take a parking lot, but you're moving that parking lot closer to the bus facility?
Yeah, we'd have to rearrange some of the parking to accommodate both this one and the one in Cleveland.
And Harley's. They do
And
too.
parties, yeah. All of these site elements, when you start adding this, there's no easy kind of green field to add this. And we're going to have to be building it largely in some of the parking areas or some of the use areas. And so it's
We've
just,
got
it's
the
going to be a
roof
matter of
already.
having to move some of the asphalt.
Okay, thanks.
An obvious question is the bus loop would be factored in, so.
Oh, yeah,
there'd be
we
no
still have to have
disruption.
a bus loop.
Yeah, so that would kind of go first.
Right. So one of the things that all of these schools are going to have to deal with are the school buses, both short-term, meaning during construction, and long-term. They're going to have to make sure that moves. They're going to have to deal with the parents arriving and dropping their kids off and picking their kids up. And they're all going to have to deal with the contractors. The contractors are going to have a laydown area where they're going to have, especially on these ones where you have multiple floors, you're probably going to be building out of steel. And so they're going to have large pieces of steel they're going to need to lay down on site before they can erect it. They're going to need areas for trucks to load and unload materials and probably a trailer. And so we're going to have to factor in where those are going to go. So some of the parking is going to be impacted. And then on top of that, we've got to make sure that the teachers are accommodated with parking. So the sites are going to be complicated during the construction because of the added element of construction. And I think we're just going to need to sit down and take a look at every school and try to figure out how we're going to structure that, where things are going to go. There will be some impact to some of these things during that period of time. We may have to figure out how parents drop their kids off. We may have to figure out where teachers park. But either way, we're going to have to work that out. When we're done, everything will come back and it'll work the way it should. But in the interim, there may be a couple of different moves to make things happen.
And one really quick thing that's popped into my head, the elementary schools have the safety fences around them.
Oh,
Those would
yes,
be-
absolutely.
There will
Everything
be,
will
if it has to temporarily be taken down during the day or put back up, or
Right.
however we decide to do it, but then when it's completed, then if we need to rerun.
Right, all of that fencing will be gone.
We'll probably need fencing anyway during construction to keep everyone out of that area.
Yeah, in fact, it's important to make sure that we are able to segregate the workers from the students, obviously for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
We also want to make sure that the fencing is set up. We don't need Constantine wire, but we want to make sure the fencing's set up
Right.
to keep kids out. And they can find ways to get in that we don't have to think about.
That's true.
And so we're going to need to make sure that happens. There's also going to need to be, and we'll talk about this a little bit, wherever we make the connections to the building, there will need to be some kind of bulkhead built similar as if you go to the shopping mall and you see where they're working on a mall element. There's usually a box that's built out in front so they can work on the face of the mall. We're going to have to do the same type of thing in the school somewhere. So anywhere where we're attaching to that building, there will have to be a little area where we protrude into the school to make that addition.
And will our safety and security measures will be in place with all of this disruption and lots of openings to the building since we've all now, thanks to
Yeah,
the team? So that
Yeah.
security will be maintained.
Yeah, that'll all have to be maintained. Okay, so then, so that's about 13.4. Then McPolin, like I said, is very, very similar. It's another H pattern. We will be adding the addition off to the east into that area that is currently kind of the bus loop, so we'll have to refigure the bus loop as you see out front. Again, during construction, it'll be a little bit different. We have a little more room here to work with, and so we shouldn't have as many problems, but Jeremy Ranch might be a little tighter. This is about $9 million for the construction cost. Again, it's 27,000 square feet. Green enhancements are about $2 million, and then your FF&E and architect's fees are very close to the other, and it comes out, again, right around 13.1 million. And this does offer the wraparound. And like I said, I think the benefit of this, and we can work with the architects, is to repeat this plan, which is, I think, really a nice option for them. Then the last one is Trailside. And Trailside is a relatively easy addition. It basically goes to the east, it fits between the school and the play field. It's about 12,000 square feet. It's $4.3 million for the construction, $946,000 for the green enhancement, again based on the $75. FF&E is about $327,000. Architect's fees are about $262,000, and then the owner's costs are about $536,000. So that comes to about $6.4 million, which is the least expensive and also probably the easiest one to add on. It's a little different configuration, and it may be something that we want to look at, but again, it's adding the pre-K classrooms.
Are you talking Trailside, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, it's just adding that little
Yeah.
square area and a couple of class spaces. So if we look then at the schedule, there's a couple of things that we're suggesting, and a couple of things for you to think about. First of all, in talking to Todd, one of the things we wanted to try to do is to make sure that we were being as efficient as possible with completing the schools so that you have the opportunity to get into the schools ahead of time and do what they refer to as educational commissioning. And that is where the teachers go in, they have a little bit of time in the classroom to get things set up or how they're going to use the school. You have the opportunity as the administration to make sure you're comfortable with how the school is working. The maintenance crew and the facilities people have the opportunity to kind of make sure it's working before you actually turn it on and go to school in August. And so we were able to organize it so that we could pull the high school, get the high school done by 2024 of around July. It's actually saying July 4th, I just realized. Didn't think about that. So it'll happen either before or after the holiday. But that'll give you July to kind of go ahead and get things set up. It also doesn't disrupt any more, what I mean by disrupt, it doesn't add an element into your school activity where you're trying to bring on a school, the new portion of your school, while you're trying to finish up the other school. So the construction will end, and then the start of the new year, everybody's using the new facilities. We've aligned that with the work that is happening at Becker Hill, and the way we've done that is we have said the first thing we need to do is get the RFPs put together, the request for proposals for the architects as soon as possible, and get that first one for the high school out as quickly as possible, if you like. And then let them go to work and start the design process now. And then immediately after we get the architect for the high school, we then try to get the architect for the junior high on board. And then work with them to stagger the procurement for the contractor and start the construction. The junior high is smaller, so it'll finish earlier, probably about 2 months, we think a little earlier, still in 2024. But that will still give you the opportunity to do the educational commissioning, and then you don't have to figure out what you're moving from one school to the other school and where you're going. So you just run the schools during construction, we finish up, and then when they come back in the fall, everything is new, you make your transition to 6, 7, and 8, and you move the 9th graders. And nobody's trying to deal with all that confusion during the school year.
So that's fall of 2024.
Of fall of 2024. We did look at seeing if we could push that back anymore, and we're a little concerned because of the remodel. We think there's going to be kind of they're going to have to do some summer work, so they kind of need those time periods to kind of do some things, we think. And so when we get the contractor on board, we'll see if we can work through that. But it's kind of challenging to try to compress that anymore.
Yeah.
So we think that.
So when you say 2024, do you mean that's when it's completed or that's when it's starting?
That's when it's
It's
completed.
Completed, okay.
Yeah,
So it
if you
Yeah, I just couldn't
if
get
you
that.
do the early start ahead of the bond, then that's a decision that you're going to have to think about. For the elementary schools, we would kind of do the same thing. As I mentioned, we would give 2 schools to 1 architect. We'd give Jeremy Ranch and Nicole, we recommend, to 1 architect, have them go through the design process together because it's basically the same building, getting the same addition. And then the other 2 schools, we would have 1 start and then we'd have the other one start. And that's nice because 1 is a little bigger and 1 is a little smaller. You could give those to different architects or you could give them to the same architect. It's probably not going to be a big impact because of the size. But either way, it looks like if you run those and you stagger on the way we've laid it out, everything seems to end right around June, July of 2023. So your elementaries will be done a year ahead of the high school and the junior high, which I think is also good because then it gives those kids that are in the elementary school that year of kind of disruption as you're still moving, or lack of disruption while you're still moving. So I think that's, and I just noticed I've got a typo. It says June of 2025, but it's really June of 2024. So we'll correct that and get that republished.
So just a quick question on logistics. So the elementaries are done first. Fifth is, wait, no, never mind, it's not disrupting that at all. Never mind,
No.
we're done.
So wraparound
Yeah.
services are done
Yep, great.
in 2 years.
Yeah, all of that would be done a year ahead, and then the last pieces would be finishing up the Eckerd Hill, which would probably be the remodel portion. I would assume that the contractor, depending on when we get them on board, the bids, the first thing they're going to want to do is get the structures up, get them dried in so they can work through the winter. That'll be their primary goal, and then once that's up, then they'll start thinking about working on the interior and the remodel, but we can probably guide that so it happens over the summer. But that's why they need those 2 summers.
Andrew has a question.
Yeah.
You have 2 questions. So one is the demolition cost of Treasure factored in here at all?
Oh, you mean removing it at the end?
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
we can. It was about, it's either $3 or $6 million, and I can't remember for sure, but
Because I think we need to add that in as well as
we certainly could do
any
that.
soil mitigation in the area. Because anytime you rip stuff up on this campus, there has to be mitigation due to
Right.
tailings.
Yeah.
So I think that's
Bush has covered it up, but it's there.
a cost that we need to factor. And then the other one is with the green enhancements. It's a huge cost per square foot. What,
It really is.
so two-part question. One is, how do we explore whether or not there's any grants to pay for that, which I would imagine there must be, because I think that would be a factor in deciding how much we want to spend on environmental enhancements. And then
Sure.
second, do we, in this calculation, do we save any money over the long term by making the building more green? Obviously, if we're powering 100% solar in our buildings, we reduce our electricity costs in theory. So what's our, I guess my question would be, out of the $75 a square foot, what's our true net cost? You know, in terms of 75 minus grants, or do we recoup that whole 75 after 10 years because of energy savings, or after 20 years, or what's the buyback? Because I think that's other than the building, it's our biggest line item.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, and it's one that we will have to study once the architects get on board, because each of the different energy enhancement options have a different payback period. It used to be that solar panels would pay back in 15 years. They're more efficient now, and they pay back in, say, 10 years. We may choose to do geothermal, or what is that? Not geothermal, but geothermal, sorry. Where we drill holes,
Yeah.
and then we run the water down in there, and we actually use the ground as a heat sink, and we pull the heat out, and then we run the water back up, and it's cooler, and we use that, so we're not running a chiller as much. Those tend to be even a little more efficient, so we might want to look at doing those. They work really well in parking lots, for example, and so you can put all those drill holes in parking lots, put the asphalt over it, and you're good to go. But those are a less cost and a sooner payback than going to solar voltaics.
And will we have somebody that is actually an expert on these
Yes.
different, okay.
Yeah, the engineers that work for the architects will give us the entire payback profile for that. To your question of energy grants, there are grants that are available both through state and federal grants. I'm anticipating with this new administration and some of the policies that they're putting in place and some of the bills that we're seeing, there's a new infrastructure bill that is being debated, or starting to be debated in Congress. It's like, I don't know how many billions of dollars it is, but it has a certain amount of a green initiative, quote unquote, in it. And I think there'll be things that you can apply for in there. We'll have to do some research. I don't know what those are, but we can work with Todd and try to identify where those are. A lot of the mechanical and electrical engineers that work in the field have a good understanding of what these geothermal systems cost. They also have a good understanding of how the solar elements work. And then the architects, as we lay out the buildings, we will start talking about energy efficient materials. So when you look at the whole package of green initiatives, it breaks down kind of into 2 or 3 areas. One is, what can you do from an energy savings standpoint? And that's probably the highest concern is, can we reduce the energy consumption? Because with the cold weather that you have up here, you are consuming energy year round, especially in the summers it gets warm, in the winters it gets cold. The other thing is then, what do you want to do with regards to what's good for the humans and what's good for the planet? Meaning, we don't want to add to greenhouse gases, we want to reduce VOCs in paint, we want to reduce any off-gassing, we want to use materials that are recyclable. And so those will come in, and there's no payback to those, unfortunately. I'm sure somebody can figure something out with regards to what the payback is, but in reality, you're going to use those materials, they're going to wear out, you're going to replace them. So, it's from my standpoint, a carpet is, you're going to buy one with that's more environmentally friendly, or you're going to buy one that is less environmentally friendly. It'll last about the same, and you'll throw it out. And then you'll get new carpet. That's important. So I don't see a payback on those things. But the energy, certainly, any energy device will give you a payback through energy savings.
Well, I think
And I don't know what
we're
those-
overlooking too, what is the cost if we don't do it? If people don't start building
Yeah.
more green, there's a cost to
Sure,
that.
there is. And so it kind of breaks into those two areas. Now, with regards to the $75, we're using that as a placeholder. That's what was recommended in the MHTN study. It creates a budget for us. I'm a big believer in designing to a budget or less than a budget, not letting it go more than that. So as we start looking at that, one of the things we'll want to do is we'll want to say how much of that budget is for renewables. Let's say we want to say 50% is for renewables and 50% is for other green initiative items that are lights or paints or carpets or this, that, or the other. If we want to go 60% renewables or 70% renewables, then we'll design to that budget and we'll only buy the amount of renewable energy that we can for that budget. And if we want to reduce that budget, so if you want to go from $75 a square foot to $65 a square foot, then we can work to that budget as well. So right now, that's just a budgetary number. And we can break that number out separately. That's why we're carrying and showing it separately, so that when I show you the roll-up, I think the total's around $27 or $28 million, you can then decide how much of that you want to use. The other thing you can do is right now, that number, I might as well go to that slide since we're talking about it. Right now, I guess it's $24 million. Right now, the total spend is about $95 million for construction. When you add the green energy initiatives to it, it's about $24 million more, and then you've got your FF&E, your architect's fee, and the other costs. That totals around $141 million. And the delta between what was in the report of 120 and the 140 is really the green energy. And so let's say that you have a desire to do the entire 141, but you think that the green energy really ought to be focused on the high school and the junior high. Well, you can do that. Because the other schools, it may not produce as much value to you because of the fact that they are smaller and that the bang for the buck is going to be smaller because the proportion is smaller.
We've
So
got a
maybe-
lot of north
Right, so
projections
maybe,
on there.
yeah, so maybe you move that to the high school where you'll get a bigger energy savings overall, because what your goal is not to reduce just the schools, but to reduce the energy consumption overall for the district. And if you can make a bigger impact at the high school, say, and you can turn that whole building into being run as a net zero,
Or close.
don't take that literally, but,
Right.
but let's say that was the goal, and you could take the high school offline from electrical, that might be a bigger benefit to the school district than trying to put 3 voltaic panels on each of the elementary schools. The other way you could do it is you can look at still putting those photovoltaics in certain locations. And then we'd have to look at how your energy bills come in, but you can apply that energy to whatever piece of equipment you want internally with your own accounting. So
Can we
it
add
kind of
on,
depends.
John, sorry to interrupt, but can these be add-ons? So say I'm making this up.
Absolutely.
We just say we're going to focus on the high school, hit pause on everything else, but we may want to revisit Edgar. These can be plugins.
That's
after the
right.
fact.
So what we would do, if that's the direction you wanted to go, we could design every school with, is it a capacitor or what is it? There's a device that we want to put on the building, on the equipment, so that when you do add the photovoltaic, it plugs in. I can't remember the name of it, but it's either a capacitor or it's kind of a converter or something. And so we would want to take some of that 24 million, which is a small amount, and make sure you equip and make sure that it's PV ready, so to speak.
Okay.
And that may cost a couple of million instead of spending the whole 24.
Okay.
And so I think there's a lot of flexibility with that 24 million and how far you choose to go and how far you choose to kind of back off. And frankly, and this is kind of the hard part that you're going to be faced with. You can move forward, say, with a bond of $141 million and decide as we get into the design that you're going to just make it compatible, or ready,
So like,
yes,
efficient, right?
photovoltaic ready,
Yep.
and not spend the $24 million and not incur that in your bond costs. And therefore, it would reduce what you sell for your bonds. The problem is, the public kind of has been told is 141 million. The other way to do it would be to do the 120 million and then try to find out how you can raise or how you can get the other 24, and maybe you go through another bond issue later for green energy, or you go through after we do what I think Andrew was suggesting. We go through and we look at what grants we can get, we look at paybacks, and we look at some of the other things, and then we figure out what the real cost is going to be, and then we go out and do that. So I think you have a couple of options with that.
Can I ask you a question? I should know the answer to this, and I
No, that's
apologize
okay.
if I don't. Can you help me understand what activities and owner costs are? So the 5.7 mil for activities, fees.
Architects.
I mean,
Oh,
architects.
architects, yeah.
I'm like, so I need glasses for that.
That's okay, it's
Owner
small.
costs.
So the
Sorry,
owner
just-
costs are,
Yeah,
you have to pay for all the permits, you have to pay
Okay.
for all the reviews by the building officials.
got it.
They
Okay.
cost more. There's, our fees are in there.
Okay.
Not that they're a huge part of that, but
Special
they're,
inspectors,
Got it.
they're in it. Huh?
special inspectors, surveyors.
Right, all of the associated fees that come
Okay.
up. You're fortunate that you don't have to buy property.
Oh, yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
and this kind of brings us, it's a really great question, because it brings us to the next point. One of the things that in looking at the budget that we are concerned about, is that we typically see the owner's costs being a little higher than what are projected. So on most of the projects that we work with, they range between 25 and 28, 29%. You're running about 16% right now, so you're a little low. So you might want to consider adding a 10% contingency to the project to cover not only the fact that your owner costs might be a little bit low, but there's also going to be unknown conditions. You mentioned some of the soil amendments that we're going to have to deal with. We don't know the extent
Yeah.
of what that is, and I don't know how much MHTN put that into their numbers. I'm sure they've accounted for some of it, but I can tell you, once you start digging in the ground, it's a crapshoot. You can go out and do all kinds of surveying, you can do GPR work to try to figure out what's down there, you can do drilling to try to get a sense, but you can have a buried Chevrolet out there, and you can drill on both sides of it, and you don't know until you excavate it. And it's just one of those things, and unfortunately, you give all that information to the contractor and they can bid, but the courts have held that you own the land, therefore you own the problem. And so there's kind of no way around it. So it's nice to have a little contingency. There is some in that $8.9 million, and that's 16%. It's just a matter of how much risk do you want to take on. Some owners are a little more risk averse, some are a little less. I think you can do what you need to do for 16 to 20%, but it's going to get kind of tight. And so I'm just suggesting you consider that as you deliberate and think about what it is you want to do. And it doesn't need to be the full 10%, it could be a portion of it, just whatever to kind of help you through those rough spots. The other thing is that if you don't need it, you don't sell the bonds for it.
And that you said was another owner cost, the line item?
Pardon me?
Was it in the line item of other owner costs? Is that what you're talking about?
That's where I would,
Yeah, that's where you put it.
that's
Okay.
where I would put it.
Okay.
But it's not in there now.
Got
So
it.
we didn't add 10%.
Yeah.
I would add probably 10%
Okay.
to the, if you could, to the overall, so that'd be 14, or you could just add 800,000 or $1 million, however you want to deal with it.
But do you have to look at that number because of the cleanup? Because that's not part of this?
No, cleanup is part of it.
I mean,
It's just
no,
for
Treasure Mountain.
For Treasure.
If you wanted to demolish Treasure Mountain, we'd have to add that into the construction costs.
So that's not.
And that'll add it, and that's not in there.
Well, we all know that it was a super fun site
Uh-huh.
until the Olympics and all the politics, but, so we kind of know what we're getting into, it's going to be a lot of work.
So I think, why don't we have you bring that number back to us for the next meeting,
Sure.
just to kind of make sure that we have that. And we can add that in either into do you put that in construction or do you put that into other owner costs? As far as,
I've got a whole cost estimate on it that I can get from.
Chair Grady?
yeah. Go ahead, Todd.
Chair Gray. Yeah, so when we worked with NHTN, we actually did the estimate knowing that the site had soil contamination removed by the EPA, and the cost of that time was just a little over $6 million.
Okay, so,
We hadn't built it into these numbers just yet because we wanted to keep Treasure Mountain available for reducing the impact on students and their movement around during construction.
yeah,
And also, typically, you don't have demolition only as a bond item. So that's something that we would probably have to use our own capital funds or some other funds
Oh, interesting.
okay,
for that cost. But it's good to have it as a total project cost.
okay.
I'm wondering if we can have a
Perfect.
separate conversation about treasure, like once all this is put to bed, what is that? What are we doing with that? It's a great piece of land, it's a great footprint, what does it need or what do we want it to be, just
Yeah.
ideas?
Well, and
That's-
that's kind of what we thought, is
Okay.
that why spend the money on doing anything there now? Because you're gonna want it all the way through the project.
Right.
You're not gonna consider even tearing it down until the end anyhow. And so you may want to do that at another time. To Todd's point about bonds, they don't like to loan money or to put something out there on a project you're removing because there's no value in it's gone.
True.
And so there's nothing to weigh against the bond. So they aren't very interested in that, from my understanding.
All right.
So we'll
So
pull
does
that
anybody
in.
have any other
Yes.
questions about the financial part, like where we're at here, or do we,
No, I mean, just thoughts on next steps, but I'll wait till the end.
okay.
Okay. So then just a couple of thoughts. With regards to noise, construction does create noise, as we mentioned. Demolition of existing facilities is noisy, things fall, and you know, when they dig it up and they drop it in an empty dump truck, it is noisy. Truck movements are noisy. They have alarms on the back of the trucks that are designed to drive you crazy because of the decibels that they put out and the frequency that they're coming in so that you can hear them. And then the cutting of materials is probably one of the worst noises, and they're penetrating, especially today when they're using metal studs and they have to cut those.
Makes my teeth hurt just thinking about it.
Yeah, the sounds are there. So we'll have to find a way to insulate against that, or to protect the building against that. There are sound blankets that you can put up, and there are certain other things you can do, but you're still going to have noise. And so I just want to make sure that everybody understands that. The traffic impact, as we talked, we're going to have to make sure that we're separating the buses, the parents, and the teachers from the construction traffic. Construction has to accommodate, you know, their working space, the laydown areas. They have to make sure that the trucks can be cleaned when they leave the site, so we're not tracking dirt out into the community, and there's a whole program for that. Safety considerations, we want to make sure that the sites are safe, that the kids can still go out to recess and do all the things that they need to do. But at the same time, we also want to make sure that the construction workers are not mixing or mingling with the kids. We don't need to go into the pool of construction workers, but I don't know that you really want them interacting with each other. And so we need to make sure that there's those kind of things. We will suggest that the contractors put in certain measures for drug testing and other types of things, not only for their own safety, but to make sure we don't have problems on site. Demolition or loss of existing space, we're going to have to look at how we want to deal with that, because each one of these buildings, whether we go with portables or whether we move them over to trailside or wherever we move kids or whatever we do with them, there will be a certain amount of loss, and we can work around that, but there's going to have to be different accommodations. So for example, if we're going to focus just on doing some of that work in the cafeteria at Eckerd during the summer, that's fine. If on the other hand we choose to move forward with doing something there, we're going to have to find a place for kids to eat lunch. And so it's just a matter of how invasive are the remodel or the attachments going to be, and then we just have to work through that. We won't know that until we get into the design process. we do want to do everything we can to keep the current classrooms and the functional activities that are happening within the buildings moving. There will be some loss of daylight in the classrooms during the construction because we have to put up some kind of a wall to separate what's happening on the outside from the inside. So more than likely, I'm assuming that that will cross over glass panels, which will limit some daylight. And you may want to, in that case, figure out if you want to leave the kids in that room or do you want to move them somewhere else. So does that mean you move to portables? Do they come to trail side for a period of time? How do we do that? So there's going to have to be some thinking about how that works. And then the gym and lunchrooms will need to be considered and try to accommodate the daily functions. And that we've talked a little bit about. So at the end of the day, I think we've tried to, for the budget, I think we've tried to accommodate all 7 of your priorities. I think we've tried to do it within the order that you have suggested. So I think that that kind of brings us to the conclusion of what we prepared. And I'm happy to answer questions, or if you guys want to kind of figure out where you want to go, I'm happy to take notes.
Well, I guess I would ask, and you may have discussed already, so I apologize, but is the green energy cost part of the construction cost in here already, or is that something?
It's part of the 141.
It
And
is.
of that, it's 24,437,000.
Carrie,
Oh,
separated.
I see it, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Perfect. Andrew, do you have any other questions or thoughts on?
No, I mean, I think I like the idea of separating out the green energy and looking at that as a separate line item just because of its expense. I mean, as a percentage of the overall project, it's huge and I think it's important, but I don't want to bog down the project with a debate over whether we should spend $25 million on making the buildings green. So I think it's helpful to split that out, make the buildings compatible, put in the infrastructure that will allow for it, but not necessarily spend all that in one go. And then I think the other part is we can, I think we're getting to a point where we can start to explore which of these projects, if any, we can get some partnership on, whether it's from financial partners or foundations or various things, because we've definitely been having those conversations. There's interested parties, and I think they're kind of waiting for us to come to them with what the total ask is, and then we can look at creative financing solutions. So I think it's, this is super helpful to see everything out laid out like this.
If you pull out the green enhancements, you're probably down to around 117.4 million. I would suggest that you leave a little of that in there so that we can make them photovoltaic rated for some elements, but I think in general, you can look at it those ways.
And did you have any more questions
No,
or
I
thoughts?
think you probably just said, it was just unpacking that green enhancement. What are our utility costs, where are they most seasonality, and really see where we get the biggest bang for buck, as you said. And then what do we do as far as retrofitting them? We don't, just at Eckerd High School. So just unpacking that whole 24 million to see where we end up. But I also totally agree based on a whole bunch of stuff, but putting in a contingency of something, because we never know.
Yeah, and so I think as far as getting into the details of the green enhancements, we'll have to do that as we go through with the architects. So, but we can certainly do that.
I don't know if Wendy has any other things. As far as like moving forward into our next meeting, do we want to now have an understanding of our financial breakdown and move that into our next board meeting? Or do we want to keep that more as a work session and understand and do one more work session and keep it that way?
I think between what Andrew said about the green cost being ready to plug in, but maybe not go there right now, and what the points Ann brought up, I think that it needs to still be another work session, because we are still asking for different numbers on energy costs. And if we just get it ready, but not put those photovoltaic cells on, So I think we still need to have those numbers before we make a decision.
We don't
Not
have to make a decision,
in
it'd be
general.
a discussion in a
Yeah,
regular meeting,
fine.
so that's what I'm just trying to
Yeah.
figure out.
So I'm guessing.
If everybody's-
Yeah, if it's 120, I'd love to understand, you know.
What it is.
Yeah, creative.
Everybody,
finance.
I know you have been like very involved in the financial thing, so give us a little bit of your thoughts with that.
Yeah, so we've been approached by Zions Bank, who has been a generous community partner during the Lafayette Foundation. They have an interest in working with our financial advisor and team to try to create some creative financing solutions, and we're going to have some more discussions with them. I think there's also a bunch of philanthropic foundations in the state that have a shared interest in seeing social impact projects such as early childhood education and wraparound services, as well as CTE. And I think there's a likelihood that there's philanthropic money available to us in that capacity. So I think, we're kind of at the point now where if we have an idea roughly of what the ideal total cost is, we can start to look at piecing that out and figuring out, okay, can we get any of it privately financed? Are there loans available that are at the same or more attractive rates than geo bonds? Or, do we want to purely look at geo bonds one shot this fall? Do we want to look at a combination of geo bonds and lease revenue bonds? Do we want to look at a combination of those two plus bank loans? I think there's a lot of different possibilities, and we're fortunate in that we have entities helping us and advising us on different creative ways to utilize our assets, which is our land and our buildings, to achieve that financing. And I think, and then the other element would be potentially partnering with a developer to look at the use of some of our other land that isn't school building land, such as parcels that we own or we're close to owning, and seeing if we can generate some income from those lands that would offset the interest expense of the debt. So if we look at a project that's roughly $120 million, and we know that the borrowing cost right now is, let's say, 2%, then your annual expense, you know roughly that your annual interest expense is going to be $2.25 million, right? And so the question is, do we have a way to recoup some of that through development? Can we finance the interest expense or part of the interest expense through the use of our land and through other ways, right? And at the same time, and probably more importantly, creating housing solutions for our employees and for the community that the community has a shared interest in doing. So I think that's kind of where we are. It's the conversations I've been having have been super productive and encouraging. I think there's, it's remarkable that in a state where education funding is so low, I think there's a huge amount of goodwill, especially from corporate foundations and family foundations and helping to fund these projects. So I think that's kind of where we are. And Todd or our team from Stiefel can speak more to the different possibilities, but traditionally it's just been geo bonds, putting them up whether they pass or fail, or lease revenue bonds have become more popular, especially down in the valley. And those are only slightly more expensive, and there's an advantage in that you can be more flexible in terms of starting some of these projects before March, for example, or March 2022, things like that. And then there's the opportunity just to get straight bank loans and things like that, which could be attractive from a social impact perspective. So I think there's a lot of work to do with Stiefel, our financial advisor, and Todd and his group, and look at not only the opportunities that Zions can creatively think about, but other potential financiers in the state. So it's pretty cool.
Thank you. So do we think bring in Stiefel for the next board meeting?
Sure, yep. Yep.
And
And
if
should
there's
we just,
anybody who's
should we
still-
just throw a number of like 120 and see how they would, or do they just
Structure
kind
that?
of, yeah.
Or do you-
What do you just suggest we do? How do we get the most out of that meeting so we can start making some decisions?
Well, I think we pretty much have the numbers from them from the last meeting
Okay.
on what that cost is.
Yeah,
Right now, I think the numbers they had were 1.9% for geo bonds, 1.65, or sorry, 1.65 for geo bonds, 1.9 for lease revenue bonds. And those will fluctuate based on interest rates, which are going higher. So you have to conservatively think that they're going to be a little bit higher. And then really, I think the next step for us is to say, okay, this is the project we want to move forward with, and it's going to cost roughly $120 million, and then explain to the public that we're looking at creative ways of financing it, and get started on that, and, you know, kind of move forward. I don't know that, because they're, you know, the traditional municipal finance teams are just going to look at traditional methods.
Yeah.
Right? And I think we're in a really cool spot that we have partners in the state that really are excited about trying new things and helping us from a social impact and philanthropic angle. And I also think we have, you know, an unbelievable community and ed foundation, which, you know, is very good at raising revenue as well. So I think it's really about now, if this is the plan that we all want, which I mean, it seems like we're all in agreement, then we can say, all right, let's move forward and talk about finance. And
Yeah.
I don't know that that's, I think part of it is like, let's see where some of these other organizations come in, and, you know, I think we kind of know roughly what the cost would be if we go out and bond it, and then probably start talking to the community in town halls and in various forums to explain, you know, again, the process, how we got here. It started 2 years ago. We did strategic planning, master planning, ed spec. You know, this is part of the feedback loop. These decisions aren't something that, you know, are coming out of thin air. They're all been, you know, coming from a process, and, you know, start to socialize that again with the community, because ultimately it's their call. You know,
Yeah.
and how we pay for it
Yeah.
is their call too.
yeah.
I think crucial in that is if we're gonna look at, and maybe I missed something, but if we're not gonna include the green enhancements, fine, as part of the bond, let's structure that to your point, getting other grants and other ways to fund that. It's not that we're not doing it, it's that we're looking outside resources to do it. So exploring that,
Well,
as we're exploring the structure of the bond, I think we'll have I think the community's gonna respond to that.
But I think also unpacking that is my big question.
Right,
because it's
yeah,
like,
it's,
which
what does that
school-
look
what
like?
we were saying,
Exactly.
what school
We have to
we would
unpack
pay.
that,
Right,
the
seasonality, yeah.
$75 per square foot,
Because we could
where
say.
we could get the money from.
Right.
But I also think
Make
it's
it
a
a
great
priority.
pull-out for
Yeah,
the
pull it out.
community as we're, you know, and asking the community
Totally.
the priority of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right.
I really like the stacked Gantt, so we're doing everything at the same time versus the staggered. That's really exciting to me to see that, you know, the possible
Me too.
end dates for
Right.
these.
Love that.
Super exciting, plus, let's just get it done, you know?
So I have a question on that.
Yeah.
One of the things we can start doing tomorrow or today is developing the RFP for the architects. We'll have that ready to go, and we'll be able to move that forward probably within a couple of weeks. Are you ready to start talking about getting the architects on board so that we can get that work moving forward ahead of the bond election?
Yeah.
Because that's what gives you the ability to get done in 2024 and 2023.
Yep.
Of the expenses, of the architect expenditure, which is 5.7 million,
Yeah.
how much of that needs to be paid at this beginning part of the stage versus at the end of construction?
About 25% of that will be for construction, and the rest would be paid ahead of construction.
An investment.
So it's an investment. You're probably looking at, $1.6, about $2 million off of that. So you'd be looking at about $6-7 million right now for the architects. And that we'll have to sit down and
I thought
negotiate.
it was.
Oh, I thought-
I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong number. I was looking at the
Wow.
bottom one. So it'd be about $1 million off, so you'd be looking at about 4.7, 4 or 5, somewhere around there.
That we,
That, now,
might range
some of
across.
that could be, depending on where the bond is at, you wouldn't have to spend all of that. That would be the design portion. And then the construction portion would be about $1 million to $1.5 million for that number. And that will, all of the design processes cross November. And so we could structure it so that we were only paying out of pocket that portion until we get to November, and the rest of that could be done next year.
And how long does the RFP process take generally?
So it takes probably in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 weeks by the time you put it out, identify a short list, have an interview, and bring people on board.
Okay.
So I think maybe that's a little bit, about 6 weeks.
6 weeks, so 6 weeks from whenever we say go would be when?
And we've got that built into the schedule.
Oh, you do, okay. So what do we do about that?
Can we can't really make a decision about that today, but we can put that on the agenda for April 20th, correct? To make the decision to get the RFP, or are we allowed to have them start working on an RFP now without
We can-
a formal decision?
If we can advise the administration to start working on that
Okay, that would be great.
Can I ask one question before I forget?
before we advise the actual spend. Before, we have to approve the actual spend, but we can advise them to start preparing.
Start preparing.
Yeah, that's part of our services, so you can tell us just to go ahead and do it. So
Okay.
I was gonna ask about the Learning Center, and where's that in, do we know what's going on with that? Is that gonna
I
incorporate
think
into
that's
the high
going
school?
back into the high school, and then
Okay.
the learning center becomes the daycare.
Okay, okay, this, you
Yeah.
said that, and then this building, anything in there for this is stay as is? Okay. So Learning Center is swapping daycare.
Yep,
Okay.
going back into high school.
Great, okay, that's
Yeah.
my question. Like Wendy's leaving.
All right,
Sorry,
so-
I gotta go to.
No, thank you, Wendy. Okay, so we'll advise the administration to move forward on the RFP, and then we'll talk about financials for next week, or in our upcoming meeting.
Yep.
Any other questions before we adjourn, or is everybody good?
I feel like all of our questions were answered.
Yeah,
Thank you
it was
very much.
awesome,
This was
thank
great.
you so much.
Sure, and we'll try to get a little more information on some of the green
Much clearer.
costs.
Okay.
I don't know how much we can get, but
Thanks.
Great.
we'll try to break
Bye.
something.
Yeah. Bye, Wendy.
Perfect.
All
Thank
right,
you.
okay,
Okay,
so
this.
anything else?
I don't think we have anything else. If not, I feel like we have the direction that we're giving everybody, and then I'll just make a motion to adjourn until our next regular session meeting on April 20th at 4 p.m.
Second. Oh, I'll make a motion to adjourn until our next regular scheduled meeting.
And I'll second.
Perfect, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, see you next week.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Todd,
guys.
for
That was
calling in.
great.
Thank you.
That's it.
All right, I'm gonna hang up on you.
Right here, you're gonna take